So let's get started, Seth. First and foremost, guys, we're going to talk about topic number one, and that's Game Pass here. Game
What is
Pass
Game
this
Pass?
week. Oh, Jesus. If you don't know what Game Pass is by now, I can't help you. I'm sorry.
No,
But
you're good.
this week, I felt like there was just this punch after punch after punch after punch after punch of Game Pass announcements that came out, guys. Like going through, I'm gonna do a quick review of these guys. Just some of the announcements that came out. Outriders, the game from People Can Fly and Square Enix, is coming to Game Pass on day one. They announced that last Monday. It will be on Game Pass on console and Android phones and tablets and xCloud gaming. Day one on April 1st. So if you were like, ooh, this is kind of cool, but I don't know if I want to pay the money for it yet, guess what? It's going to be on Game Pass day one, which is a big boon for that game. Um, Other stuff that came out this week. Five different games got FPS boost treatment on the Xbox: Dishonored Definitive Edition, Elder Scrolls V, a Skyrim Special Edition, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and Prey. Those all got FPS boosts. They're nice and running smooth at 60 frames per second on your Xbox console. They listed a ton of games, new games coming to Xbox Game Pass, including Yakuza 6, The Song of Life, and Octopath Traveler. Yes, the exclusive game from Nintendo. You got EA Play announcing that they're coming to PC for Xbox Game Pass. As of this recording, a new expansion for The Outer Worlds got announced. And then, of course, they're doing an indie showcase on March 26th. A couple of those games which are going to be showing up on Xbox Game Pass. And so I felt we've talked about Game Pass before, but I figured our first topic tonight should be about Game Pass and their big level up. And Seth, some of the things I want to talk about with Game Pass here is, we talk about all the news that happened this week. I want to talk about, should this be the gaming model standard? Should, just like kind of, I think renting movies and stuff is kind of migrated over to services like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon Prime. Should Game Pass be that? Should we start using a subscription service to play our games, or should we stick with the tried and true model of purchasing games that like we always have? Should this be a bigger concern for Sony and Nintendo and even Steam now that Xbox Game Pass is on PC? How do we think that's affecting those companies here? And also, do we personally think that this is a really good model for gamers and developers as a whole? I know that, I've talked about on the show, one of my concerns with Game Pass, and it's just, I will definitely say it's really just ignorance. What do we, how does it help the developers? Like, are developers getting the money they need in order to like continue developing these games, or do they make more money selling the games on their own as opposed to making a deal with Game Pass? We'll do our best to say what we think on that one. But Seth, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about Game Pass. I want to talk about this subscription-based model and if it is the wave of the future for gaming. Kick us off with those conversations. That's what do you think?
Yeah, lots of questions you've asked. I want to do my best to kind of like share my insight and my thoughts about it. As many people who watch know, I'm a huge fan of Xbox. I love following Xbox. I was probably one of the 3 dozen people that actually like watched the whole Bethesda event and was like really enthralled by what they were saying, because there's so much about Xbox culture that you can kind of kind of wean off of those types of videos when you see how people are interacting with each other. But to answer your big overall question, like, is Xbox Game Pass the future of how we're going to buy games? I don't think that it is I don't think this is a future that's like, this is our one timeline, right? Like, I don't think that Game Pass will replace the way that games are purchased. Make a big game, sell it for $60 model, right? I think it's, when you look at what Game Pass does, it's not hard to see the benefits of Game Pass are basically mirrored with the benefits of streaming as it's come to fruition over the past 10 years, right?
Okay.
It's a lower barrier of entry for users, right? Which means you're able to onboard way more users than you typically would with a more traditional release, right? And it also is an environment that's a little bit more risk accessible. And so the easiest analogy, and we've used it here before, is like Netflix versus movie theaters, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
very hard to get someone to shell out $12 to go see a movie that they're not interested in, right? You've got to spend a lot of money on marketing, advertising. You got to have big star power, and still, even with all of that, it might still fail. So it's a bit of a big gamble, right? And we saw what ended up happening is that Hollywood kind of became creatively stunted, where you really were not seeing movies in theaters. And this is, of course, all pre-pandemic, right? But the movies you were seeing come to theaters were safe bets, nothing really crazy, nothing really out there. But all the creative and innovative things were happening on streaming services. And I think that the same kind of thing is going to happen with Game Pass. You're going to see more developers use it. Now, one thing about Game Pass, Cameron, is the data has already, like, research has already shown that people who are on Game Pass play more games, spend more money on those games, and spend more hours playing games. So, to answer your question, like, is Game Pass good? Yes, it's good for the industry. The other side to your question was, hey, is this good for the developers? And I want to ask, like, you said there's some ambiguity there. Like, what or I guess what's the concern? What do you think might be going on? Do you think that developers are not getting necessarily what they deserve for their Game Pass? Like, I know Outriders is a big high-profile example of a game launching into Game Pass.
Mm-hmm.
And do you think that's going to, like, affect their ability to, like, make money on that game, or no?
No, I just I want to make sure, and it's one thing that I'll say I've kind of tried to be more conscious of as a kind of being a content creator and learning and exploring more about how games are made. As I get older, I learn more about that stuff. It's really just me being conscious, not saying that, not knocking Game Pass at all. It's awesome, but making sure that developers are getting adequately compensated for their work. Just because we've heard horror stories before about, other streaming services and type of content like that. There was a big hullabaloo about, Spotify. Artists were a little upset once kind of the industry started shifting towards that subscription model because they weren't making as much money with people streaming their songs and only those companies giving them, pennies on the dollar, as opposed to when people went out and actually bought their album, whether that was digitally on iTunes or in the stores like Best Buy, Walmart, where have you, wherever you got your albums and stuff like that, and other examples like that. And that's one of my concerns. And the big part is that this isn't a knock against musicians or movie theaters. I think, depending on your movie, whatnot, I think it's kind of a fact that I think it's exponential. Say my words here. Use my words, Cam. Come on. Exponentially more expensive to create a video game than it is to maybe create a movie or music. And that's me. That's my opinion. I don't, I'm not a business person. I don't have these majors and all that other stuff. If that's wrong, a wrong assumption, somebody prove me wrong. But I'm just saying, from what I know in my optics, it's a lot more expensive to make games, and I want to make sure, a lot of the times us as gamers, we see $15 a month and go, oh my good, all these games for $15 a month, wow, but we don't take time to consider what the ramifications of deals like that could mean for, video game developers and all the people that put that work in there. Are they, are they taking less money? Are they making the same amount of money? Is it a wash because Microsoft is just front loading a lot of money that they would have made on the front end, and then they just get extra money depending on how many people play those games? That's where that's what I'm thinking of. Shadow Haxer in chat says there was a piece a few days ago that had some developers chime in on Game Pass. It's seen as an overall good thing, and I think I know which one you're talking about too, Shadow Haxer. I'm happy to hear that. I want to hear more of that. If that, to correct my thinking, it's not. I'm not saying that it's bad because of the developers. I'm just like, I like it, but I don't want to. I want to make sure you guys are taken care of, and if more developers are coming out and saying it's really great for us, it's providing a boon for us, we're feeling comfortable with that, then that makes me, I can sleep tonight. I can go I
Yeah.
go to bed and be like, okay, my favorite developers are making the games they want to play, and they're not having to worry so much about costs. That's my concern. That's my concern.
Yeah, and I think when you don't hear a lot about like the monetization side, like from a developer's perspective, because all of that stuff is very locked down. However, there are always little leaks in the dam, and so we know that, you know, Xbox, depending on your game, depending on your deal, it's going to be different for every developer, for every publisher. It could be a lump sum just to put the game on Game Pass. It's how I imagine like Red Dead Redemption 2, some of the big high-profile games are probably just lump sums. Some of them are player counts. So if you hit certain thresholds for active players, then you will achieve, you know, milestones. And then in other cases, it may be a more like a payout over time method, right? Where you kind of look at it and you gauge it over time. And I don't think that any of those programs are wrong. Using the Outriders example, I think Outriders is a perfect game for Game Pass. Outriders was gearing up to be another Godfall. It was going to be a game that came out and then kind of just disappeared, would really not have a community, not really going to hit anywhere. And it's not to slam the game. It's just, let's be real. There's A games, there's B games, there's C games, and D games, and Outriders is not an A game. Like, it is not a game that's going to like fly off shelves at a $60 to $70 price range. But putting it on Game Pass, that is immediately you've plugged into 15 million users. Boom, 15 million people are going to have access to that game on day one, and it's going to make sure that that game has a vibrant community on Xbox for months and months and months to come.
The big thing with Outriders is, you know, some people forget this small little tidbit. It's not just Xbox. It almost guarantees a vibrant community for everyone because of crossplay. And the fact that game has crossplay features. And so now you're 15 million, if all 15 million Game Pass subscribers play, then your PC players and your PlayStation players also can have access to that user base as well, which is pretty good.
Yeah, to circle back to your other question is like, should Sony be scared? Should Microsoft be scared? People love to like throw that phrase around, like, should they be scared? Are they going to get got? You know, like, is it going to be an overnight? No, I don't think it's going to be an overnight, you know, victory strategy, right? I don't think that Game Pass is going to overtake game sales by any means, right? If it does, then Sony will just pivot to that, right? But there are two things that are factors here, right? One is Sony and Nintendo in particular make games for the most part. I'm not going to say every game, but for the most part, they make games that are very finite in their consumption, right? So, you know, Last of Us Part 2, Ghost of Tsushima. These are games that you start and you finish. And generally speaking, when you look at a game like that, if you have the ability to, you know, if it's going to take you 20 hours to beat it and you have the ability to pay $15, play that game and then unsubscribe from that service, that's not a great way to like sell that game, right? Because you don't want people subscribing for 1 month to get access to the game and then unsubscribing when they finish it. And the thing with Microsoft is that a lot of their games are not that way, right? You look at Sea of Thieves, that is a game that is all about the ongoing experience of the game. Halo, all about the ongoing multiplayer, right? So it's kind of a difference in philosophy there. Now, who knows how this will change with Bethesda and all of that stuff.
I was going to say, I don't think that's necessarily it. I don't, whether the game is finite or not, I don't think that necessarily matters, because I think there are a lot of finite games on Game Pass too. There are plenty of games, and even some in Bethesda's camp that, you know, Dishonored 2.
I got another part of this point that I want to make.
Okay, go ahead.
What you're saying is very true, but the fact of the matter, like, Sony and Nintendo don't need to do this. There's no reason for them to change. Both of those companies have very strong reputations for being very focused on what they do until they absolutely have to change it, right? Sony's been doing business the same way since PlayStation came out, right? Nintendo's been doing business the same way since, honestly, since the NES came out, right? And it's because that system works for them. Microsoft has seen in the past several years that system has not really worked out well for them, right? And instead of trying to continue to compete in a space that's about 200, I've talked about this many, many times before. The console gaming space is about 200 million people big. Like, and this is data all the way back to the PlayStation 1 and 64. It doesn't get much bigger than 200 million people that own consoles in their home, right? And right now, I would say between Sony and Nintendo, they dominate about 70% of that. And I'd say Nintendo probably dominates more than Sony does in the general populace. Hardware's cheaper, Animal Crossing, all that stuff, right? Portability, et cetera, et cetera. But so Microsoft was like, okay, we're having a hard time competing. We don't want to fight over this, like, slice of a pie. So they like widened the pie, right? They said, we're not going to just focus on the hardware, like the console video gaming market. We're going to focus on the PC gaming market, and we're going to focus on the mobile gaming market, global mobile gaming market, which in the US, mobile gaming is kind of a stigma, but like in other countries, that's the way that things are. South Korea, that is the way you play video games, period. So their strategy is different. Now, I'm a personal believer. I think that the Game Pass strategy is going to work in the long run. The only thing about subscription services is if you stop the content, if you stop the flow, right, it falls apart. Whereas with Sony, like when you release an individual game, you can release a bad game, people will still want to play the next good game, right? Like Days Gone, right? Like the fact that Days Gone wasn't a huge success didn't like bankrupt Sony, right? They were just able to release another good game and people were right back on board. But with Game Pass, you have to keep like a constant flow of value coming. And I think when you look at this week, this was probably Game Pass's most valuable week ever. Like every Bethesda game coming, including FPS Boost. Outriders is one of those day one launches. Those have been key to PlayStation Plus's success, right? With Rocket League and Fall Guys being two examples of like games that just launch brilliantly on they launch for free, but on a subscription service, right? So as far as providing value to Game Pass users, those 15 million Game Pass users, I think they're doing a great job. Now, that 15 million could be 150 million in 5 years, right? We don't know what that's going to look like. But I do think that Microsoft at this point has chosen, they've kind of picked their approach. They're going the Game Pass approach. They're going to launch the games on PC and Xbox. We had this talk last week, but like, yeah, I mean, Bethesda games are not coming to PlayStation anymore. Not that you have to buy an Xbox to play them, but you are going to need to either be on PC or Game Pass somehow to play those, right? So this is how they're going to be competitive. This is how they've chosen to be competitive.
Conrio1 in chat says Fall Guys needs to come to Game Pass. I know there have been rumors of Fall Guys possibly coming to Game Pass as well. So
yeah, and I know it's supposed to come this year, but yeah, that'd be a great addition, right? So I think right now Game Pass is all on the up and up. And there's a discussion that I want you and I to have at some point in the future. I keep talking about this during our episodes. We're going to have it one day. But the only way I really see Game Pass ever becoming a problem for the industry is if it starts to change the way that games are being made. And to give you an example of this is let me cite the way that Disney Plus has been so far. I love Disney Plus. I enjoyed WandaVision. I've been enjoying Captain America and the Winter Soldier. But they have spaced it such that they're going to always... What's up?
Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, sorry. I said Falcon. Yeah, what did I say? I said
Captain America.
My bad. I'm sorry. Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Are you even a Marvel fan, Seth? Come on.
Hey, yeah, you're right. So, but they have spaced it such that WandaVision got one episode per week. And then as soon as that was over, you got a 2-week break. Not enough time for you to cancel before Falcon and the Winter Soldier starts up. Blom, 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 blom. Falcon's going to end. Guess what? Loki's up next. Like, they're always going to have this drip feed, right? And deep down, I kind of get this feeling like, I feel like they're making content to just keep people subscribed as long as possible, right? And it's Disney. Of course, they're going to do that. Disney Plus is key to their success moving forward. But, like, I look at gaming, right? And I see this weird, dark timeline where we could go and start looking at games being almost force-fed this subscription approach to try and keep people engaged, right? Like, I don't want every game to be Sea of Thieves, right? I don't want every game to just be this open sandbox, continuous gameplay. But I don't really want to have this conversation right now because I think we need more time and we need to have a better understanding of how Microsoft
we have to do our research before we have a conversation that big.
But that's really the only way I can see Game Pass going badly. Now, from your perspective, I'd like to kind of get your thoughts. Like, you were talking about it even being an issue for Steam. Like, What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that what Microsoft is doing is a little too aggressive? Are they
Well,
trying to take on too much?
I'm not. I'm not knocking the big thing, and I want to be clear. I'm not dissing or putting down Game Pass at all. It's the question I wanted to ask and present. Should it be the standards? And maybe part of that conversation you're talking about that we should have later on, Seth, is part of this topic as a whole. But having that conversation of how we've seen streaming services and streaming packages affect the music industry and the TV and film industry, and now with Game Pass it's coming into the gaming industry as well. And honestly, we've already started to see ripple effects of that with things, not only with Game Pass, but Ubisoft, the Uplay Plus, and who else has got a streaming service? EA Play.
Yeah.
And a couple of other ones like that, some that I can't think of right now. And just seeing that is there going to be a day where that is the standard, where we're sitting here talking about games and it's not about, paying $60 or $70 for the next big video game, but just making sure you're subscribed to video game subscription service A, so that you could play this game on day one. And I think it ties into that conversation, and probably a bigger one that we need to have later on is like, how does that affect the developers? How does that affect gamers? Because the big thing I'm thinking about with gamers is that I think there's good and bad for it. There's good because I think it does give gamers a chance to play those games. It's almost a balance. If you have to have just enough games, I think, in those services to allow players to feel that freedom to play them all, or play as many as they can and see what they like and don't like. We go back to Netflix. I think one of the good or bad things, Netflix has a lot of content on there, but you're never going to see all of that content. And if there's a diamond in the rough, Aladdin fans, I love it. Then what's the chance of that bubbling to the surface and getting their time to shine, unless somebody finds it and then it's word of mouth and talking about it, or if there's a game that people would generally like, but because people don't, critics don't consider it a great game or movie, then you skip on it. Example for me would be, if you remember on Netflix, the movie, it was called Bright, and it was with Will Smith, and it was basically if fantasy creatures like orcs and fairies and stuff lived in the real world. I thought the movie was great for the concept that what it was and what it had was great, but people and critics were saying, it's not a great movie, don't go watch it. But that is its own topic in and of itself. That's another conversation for another time. But I don't, that's all these questions, and we're not going to be able to answer all of them right now. It's just, and it's not. I want to make sure that subscription services like Xbox Game Pass don't inadvertently affect gamers and developers to where we're not getting able to really enjoy the games that we want, or developers not making the money and stuff that they see. The thing I brought up with Steam is if you asked could it be a concern for Steam if Steam gets to that point where you have, or no, Steam, Gabe Newell could be sitting in his chair with his multi-monitors. He's probably got a couple of 4K monitors, sitting with his 4K monitors there, watching the screens and seeing Game Pass's success, especially as it is now on PC. And these PC game, if more PC game developers start looking at Game Pass, if that eats into Steam's bottom line, and what Steam wants to do about that, if eventually we have a Steam Game Pass, where Steam starts trying to make deals and try and leverage and do stuff like, if you sign up for Steam Game Pass, we won't take 30% of your profits, we'll only take 20%, or something like that, to try and make some type of competitor to Xbox Game Pass. And that's a curious one. I don't know if I don't know if that'll happen for Steam and for PC gaming.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to let Microsoft take the risk. Like, if Game Pass is a model that's going to be able to work outside of one particular company, like I think Netflix, like the Netflix model would not have worked for more than Netflix 5 years ago, right? The idea around Netflix is they had everything. You could watch The Office. You could watch literally anything that was streamable was on Netflix. And then what happened over the next 5 years is companies started to see like, wow, okay, people are starting to move away from the theaters. We're seeing year-over-year declines. We're, getting ready for, this future. And then COVID happened, right? And that's when the bottom fell out, right? Like that's when you were no longer trending downward, you were trending zero. Like people didn't go to movie theaters. So that's why everybody scrambled. That's why Paramount Plus, Peacock, all that have launched in the past 6 months because they were scrambling to get something out. And unfortunately, they were pulling content off of Netflix to do that, right? So like I'm glad that Netflix over the past 5 years has invested a lot of money in building their own IP because
that's kind of what you have to do. But now,
once Friends in Office disappeared, like
what's interesting is I'm curious if it will get to a point just like on your subscription services like that. So now you have Peacock, you have Paramount Plus, you have Apple TV Plus, you have Amazon Prime, you have Netflix, you have Hulu, you have I think HBO Max is a service. I'm already at 7. I think there's a couple more.
You don't
there.
have to list them all.
Yeah,
we know what you're talking about. Yeah.
But now, you get to that point where like you like a couple of different shows from all those competitors, and so you sign up for all those services, and then you realize you're paying as much as you were when you had cable. And it almost seems kind of counterintuitive. And I'm curious if which I think Xbox is, Game Pass is doing, it's showing success and it's disrupting the industry. And I think I see that a lot with some of the announcements, for the Play at Home initiative for that PlayStation's doing, a lot of these, the quality of games that are coming in PlayStation Plus, but also just like the free game stuff that Epic Games does for the Epic Game Store. And if it will, I don't think it's going to be soon, but if 5 or 10 years down the line, if we're in that same position where in order to play the games you want to play, you got to have Xbox Game Pass, you got to have PlayStation Game Pass, you got to have Nintendo Game Pass, you got to have Steam Game Pass, you got to get Epic Store Game Pass, you got to make sure you get EA Game Pass, you got to get Ubisoft Game Pass. And I'm probably exaggerating a little bit there, but that's just an interesting curiosity that I have about the whole endeavor.
Cameron, I will. There's a lot that goes into this, and like I'm a designer, I love looking at data and how data like impacts the decision that things make. But let me pull an example for something that people often cite as one of Xbox's weaknesses. Right? They general consensus is that from a Eastern video game creator, particularly Japan, right? Just Xbox doesn't find a lot of success over there, right? Death Stranding, not available. Kojima's never really had that relationship, right? And that's because of a history of bad decisions related to the Eastern market, right? But one of the things that Microsoft is doing right now that could pay them dividends in the next 5 to 10 years is the investment into xCloud. And let me explain why. So right now, when you think of JRPGs and what's the most valuable brand in Japan, don't think PlayStation. PlayStation is not. PlayStation's about 15% of the market share right now. 85% of the market share in Japan belongs to Nintendo. And that is because their console is portable, right? Portable is king in Eastern markets, right? It used to be PC. It moved to portable. There was a market for consoles in Japan because of just the tech involved, but like everything has moved to, I don't want to say mobile, but like portable options, right? And so if Microsoft continues to invest in xCloud and like the idea of getting a console-like experience on a mobile device, that's what the Switch is, Cameron. That is a console-like experience on a mobile device, right? Mm-hmm. If they invest in that, there is a future where you start to crunch the numbers. You see 5 years of growth, big games coming out. There is a future where Atlas sits down and they start to look at numbers and they say, you know what? Sony's really not doing they're 15% market share in Japan. Japan is our bread and butter. We've got the Nintendo Switch, 85% market share. this Xbox Game Pass has, maybe 40% market share. I'm just pulling that number out of nowhere. And then they're like, well, where are we going to put Persona 6? Like, it's obviously needs to go to the Switch because that's where it needs to go. But do we need to put it on the PlayStation, a device that only has like that's a reality. Like, there's a reality there that, like, if everyone ignores mobile gaming, I say mobile gaming, but like if everyone ignores every other vertical, don't be mad when somebody moves into that vertical and then the business shifts to that vertical. It's what happened. It's what happened with movies. It's what happened with music. People took the path of least resistance, right? They wanted to get to the content as fast as possible. And right now, Game Pass is delivering that content as fast as possible. And it is doing a great job coexisting with the rest of the industry. The thing that might happen is it might become such a valuable proposition. There may be so much to play on Game Pass that people stop looking at retail releases as often. And that is when you're going to see other people start to make moves toward that space, right? Right now, Sony is going to launch God of War, Ragnarok, or whatever it's called, and it's going to do great. It's going to sell Ugo Bugos, right? No problem whatsoever. I can't say that in 5 years, launching a game like that is going to be as successful because, again, every single game is competing for your time and your attention. And if you can just pay $15 and get access to hundreds and hundreds of those attention-grabbing great games like Destiny, big hitters, right? All the future Bethesda games, like eventually you're going to be able to have a full gaming career just on Game Pass. So it's just really hard to talk about this at this stage because we really are this is the first step.
We're on the forefront.
Like, I feel like this week was the first like time I've seen Xbox really just being in its element, right? Where they're just Game Pass value, headset launch, FPS boost, like they just left and right, like everything they were announcing was like exciting, invigorating for that community. Is it going to peel people away? I don't think so right now. But over time, just like Nintendo has built up a reputation for amazing first-party IP, Sony has built up a reputation for consistent, great quality, great hardware, and awesome first-party IPs. Microsoft is now working to build that reputation where we're going to provide the maximum amount of value with. You said you want games. The thing that people want to see on Xbox is games. Well, here you go. We bought Bethesda. Get ready for the games. They're coming. Like they really are. I said this last week. They took the first step into the future of Xbox, and we don't know what that future holds. I can tell you this. If we had the same conversation about movies 10 years ago, I'd have been laughed out of the room if I would have said that Netflix would replace movie theaters one day. But let's wait till March, the end of this month, when we get fiscal results, and we'll see how AMC is doing versus Netflix.
Oh man,
and like
low-hanging fruit, Seth. Low-hanging.
I'm just saying that like you can't predict the future on this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
we can't predict the future, and you're 100% right. I'm curious if that is going to be the play. I think is Game Pass going to be the standard in the future? 5-10 years down the road, it's hard to say. I would counter your point near the end there of thinking that games like bigger AAA games like God of War and The Last of Us 2 won't have that impact when bought at retail. And I only say that because, like we've talked about, this conversation is a lot more nuanced because I think there's a lot more that goes into the game that we have to account for aside from, as opposed to maybe movies or maybe music.
Yeah. It's not fair to compare them. From a consumer perspective, consumer behavior dictates that people are going to go where the content is, right?
Yeah.
As long as Sony's making good games, people will continue to shill out for them.
Well,
however, there's going to be a chunk of people that are going to be carved off of Sony's player base because of the price increase, because of I've said this before, but Sony's empire is built on consistent quality. If that quality ever dips, it's gone overnight, disappears. If God of War 2 comes out and it is not a good game, if it is a Cyberpunk where it's barely playable, And I know you're like in your brain, you're like, I can't even fathom. They would never do that. Like, of course they wouldn't. But if they do, if they ever slack up and burn an IP to the ground, like similar to like Halo's happening right now, like Halo is having its moment, like it is having its ride or die moment, right? And if they ever do that, it is detrimental to the way they do business. And that is why Microsoft is moving away from Halo being the only icon that runs that brand, right?
Yeah.
They have many icons now. It's about diversifying. So,
yeah, well, and it's not.
Yeah.
Not saying all that point. I'm not talking about PlayStation's model and Microsoft's model. I'm talking more like just about like, $60, $70 games and retail purchases and stuff like that. I think everybody understands fully that if consumers, a lot of the times, us as consumers, we're going to think about one thing: what can I get? What can I pay the cheapest amount of money for the best, for the most amount? I want to get more for less. That's pure simple. I'm talking, and I'm not talking about God of War is going to drop it, and all that other stuff. I'm purely talking about is there going to be a time where Xbox Game Pass is going, and just subscription services in general is going to flood the gaming market, to cause Sony to reinvent how they're doing games, to cause Nintendo how to reinvent that, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just saying that I agree with your point. One point there, that that is a long way away, and I think this will be a reoccurring discussion that we have about this particular topic.
For sure. And at the end of the day, Microsoft is a services company. They sell services. That is what they do. They sell hardware to supplement the sale of those services. But at the end of the day, the Xbox Series X is not what they're focused on when it comes to selling you something. They would rather you sign up for Game Pass than anything else. That is their number one priority.
Sony, exactly.
Sony
we gotta wrap up, Seth.
Cameron, if you let me give you the beautiful segue I'm about to give you, my friend.
Okay, go ahead.
Sony is a hardware company. Their focus is on selling you great hardware, right? So they've seen great success in the console market. They've also seen awesome success in VR.
Awesome. Thank you for the segue. I'm looking at time like,
I'm looking at time too, Cameron. You told me to keep an eye on it. I'm a responsible adult. I'm only going to take up 2 hours to talk about Xbox every other show.
Oh, okay. See, that was the clarity I needed, guys. Yes.